で天気も変わるんで晴れるだけでもすごい気分がいいですね。でここからですけどちょっと見ていただきたいんですけど、あれがポートノットシティですね。でサイレントボイトの曲がかかってカメラが引いたりちょっと映画っぽくアクションしながらこういう演出が入ります。でこれすごい気持ちいいんですけど、諏訪尻ってありますよね、富士山の、ああいう感じです。でも気を抜くと転がって荷物壊れるんで気をつけながら景観を見ながらむせびなきゃ。これねゲームやってるとここで泣く人多いです。ドラマでも泣くんですけどこういうところで結構泣くんですよ。
グッときますね。
あそこに自分の荷物を持っている人たちがいるんです。で世界中で同じことをしている人たちが何百万人いるんです。でその人たちとつながって協力してここまで来れた。
This was Kojima explaining the feelings he wanted the players of Death Stranding to experience while reaching the destination of this mission, which is pretty much the end of the tutorial map that you start out on. This is likely the longest and most difficult journey the player has been on yet, but even in the face of uncertainty, the player set out, overcame the difficult terrain, bested the BTs blocking the path, and endured the expedition to finally make it to this point, where the end was in sight. And as the camera pulls back to show the view and the music from the soundtrack swells, the player has the opportunity to reflect. Not too long ago, they were struggling to traverse relatively easy terrain with less of a load and complete deliveries. But now, they had the foresight to bring the right gear, and they had mastered the mechanics enough to pull off making this trip. So as the journey was reaching the end, the player would feel how far they had come, not just on this trip, but how much they had progressed as a player of this game. At least that's how I felt when I reached this spot. And that was one of the things I really enjoyed about this game, the sense of progression. You go from falling on your face on flat ground to being the Amazon Employee of the Month delivering truckloads in a blizzard. The game makes a point that dying is a big deal, so when I first played this game, I was extremely careful. I avoided BTs as much as I could, I was extremely slow and careful when I would get caught near them, and I would get out of a vehicle when I was near them as to avoid triggering an attack. I played very cautiously. I would do as much as I could to avoid damaging or losing packages. I never ended up dying on this playthrough. I wouldn't take the risk of overpacking with cargo and instead would play it safe by bringing more supplies in case things went wrong. I thoroughly enjoyed my time. I felt that sense of progression throughout my whole playthrough. And so I decided to 100% the game and get 5 stars with every location, and in doing so I realized some things. I wanted to be as efficient as possible and take as many packages on a trip as I could, so I pushed the truck to its limits. And you can basically go everywhere with it. I would also test my luck with the BTs and realize they weren't much of a threat. Even if you get caught in the truck, you just get out, walk away while shaking them off for a bit, throw a few blood grenades, and then you can get back in and be on your way. I found I didn't really need to use a lot of the available mechanics. It was mostly looking at the map and the mountain and trying to figure out which route I thought a truck could make it. So when the director's cut came out, I thought it would be a good opportunity to play the game again. So I bought it and started the journey as Sam Bridges once again. But this time I was equipped with the knowledge from my last playthrough and knew that vehicles were overpowered, BTs weren't much of a threat, and losing or damaging packages didn't really punish you that much. So I took advantage of that knowledge and realized on this playthrough that the sense of progression was not as prominent. I still enjoyed the game, I loved the atmosphere, the soundtrack, the storytelling. I think a lot of the mechanics are really cool. But on this playthrough I realized how much more interesting the missions were that forced you to use something other than just the truck. I mean, Kojima even says it here himself.
でね、ここでバイクで行く人もおるんですけど、あんまりそれしてほしくないなみたいな。
歩いてほしいですね、ここね。
一瞬で行ってしまう。曲聴いてくれみたいな。
So, for the second game, my biggest hope is that the vehicles are not too overpowered. I think with what we've seen so far, there's a lot of potential. Different settings with their own unique terrain and weather events seem like they could force the player to use different tools and mechanics and keep the players on their toes so that they have to plan for disaster and then improvise with the equipment they have when things go wrong. I know they did show more vehicles, but hopefully there is more of a balance this time. Maybe a vehicle that is riskier and more difficult to master using but gets the job done quick, so a player has to consider the gamble of using a risky vehicle that is likely to fail or just use a safer alternative. I also think so many of these mechanics could lend themselves to combat in a really cool way.
Looks like you decided to trade in that rope for a stick this go-round.
This line makes me think there probably will be more combat against enemies that are not BTs, and I think it could be really interesting, almost going towards the combat in Metal Gear Solid 5. Imagine there's an enemy camp with mountains on one side and a river on the other, and they have a package that you need. You could scout out from afar and plan your whole mission. You might park down the river, take some ladders and ropes to be able to traverse your way up above the camp, take some out with a silenced ranged weapon to clear the path to the package, equip your stealth legs to go into the camp and get the package. This triggers an alarm, so you equip your speed legs and shields to just sprint through the enemies and jump into the raging river at the edge of the camp. But you planned for this, so you brought along some sort of equipment that lets you float in the water. You quickly float to where your truck was parked, down the river, get in your truck, and make a clean getaway. I know this is all just speculation and wishing for stuff, but I think there's a potential to use the mechanics for traversal and apply them to combat scenarios. I'm hoping that this is explored more in the second game. So basically my biggest hope is that Death Stranding 2 encourages the player to have to use all the tools and mechanics in different scenarios. Other than that, I have no worry that it will be a polished experience with great visuals, a great soundtrack, a great atmosphere, and in typical Kojima fashion, intriguing storytelling, even if I'm only vaguely understanding what's going on. Maybe just not have a line like this again.
Like Mario in Princess Peach.
I love the first game, and with what we've seen from Death Stranding 2, I'm pretty optimistic that it's going to be even better. Right now, it's my most anticipated game. Just please, Kojima, don't make our walking simulator a driving simulator.